We're at Impact Economy 2015 with Paul Hartzog and Danny Kim. Thank you so much for being here and sharing what it is that you do. I'd love to hear about
interfacing.
We're going to just start there and go there.
Well, Danny and I were just talking about interfacing and the way it manifests in systems and between people, and so we were just bouncing around some ideas in the sessions. For me, a skin is an interface, the eyeball is an interface. Technological systems have interfaces, and all of those interfaces, they mediate our perception. So there's no unfiltered perception. It always comes through some preamble and some process that ends up coloring what's going on later. And so there's a lot to be learned by looking at how systems interface and looking at how people interface. And I'd love to hear Danny's ideas here.
Great.
For the idea of interfacing is the action, of it. And yes, we do use several different mediums, and oftentimes we call the process of interfacing different types of communication. Maybe it's body language, maybe it's an API. And this is the comparison between how the setup of those tools will greatly influence how you can interface between different objects and people and systems. So essentially what I was kind of going at was people generally have difficulty finding a way to interface with each other if you're not revealing what tools are available. And oftentimes, what a major barrier of that is that people are not willing to reveal those tools and systems because they feel like it might offend or it might not fit and maybe scare someone away. But I've always been a big proponent of, regardless of any type of conflict, it's important that you show what's available, you show what's not, and you open up the space for people to know how to interface with you. Some people will walk away.
So maybe you need an interface for interfacing?
Yes, oftentimes, and that user experience is very complex. But when you present an interface, you're essentially standing up and showing people exactly how to interface with you, how to interact with you. If you're expecting something, you make it very clear. And yes, you will scare people away, but that's actually part of the process that would have happened anyway, only through a long and painful process if you did not put it up front in the first place. So in the same way with the systems, if you're always hiding what your APIs are, no one will know how to interface with you. But at the same time, you're afraid of what that API will access in the system. What if this data is released? What if that data is released? And oftentimes that also closes off what's possible. Great. And so, yes, scare away people. Yes, attract some people, but at least it's clear, it's done, and it's more efficient.
Paul, maybe you can share some thoughts on how we can make create that interface for interfacing.
Well, the thing is, you can think about it at a meta level, right? So in order to interface, there's a certain kind of exposure and vulnerability and discoverability that has to be present, whether you're talking about people or whether you're talking about systems. There's a difference between existing in a space and saying, here's how I do it, or existing in a space and saying, here's a portal or a membrane or a point of connection, right? And I love Danny's thing about APIs. The difference between a closed system and an open system is how willing you are to expose your internals to those connections. And I think it's really important that we develop open, discoverable means so that we can connect systems and connect people.
It's also important from the other side, to be able to reach out and find those connections. Oftentimes, people will sit there and say, I'm looking to do this, guys. I'm looking to this. These are my APIs. They're opened up to this. Please interact with these APIs if you'd like to interact with me. And then oftentimes people kind of skip over that and don't identify that that's what they were looking for. And then there becomes interfacing problems. Same thing with systems. If you're trying to integrate with a system and you're not taking the time to see where you can integrate with it, and you keep telling the system, let's integrate. The system is saying, this is the way in which we can. And if you don't approach it at the same level, it creates conflict, and then it creates misunderstanding, and then nothing gets done. Right.
So here we are, and thank you both so much for coming and exploring these spaces with us and interfacing your projects with everyone else, because that's part of what's happening here at Impact Economy 2015.